When a man finds a woman who brings peace to his life, it's not pressure. Something inside him begins to shift. It's not just attraction anymore. It's not just interest or curiosity. It becomes something deeper, something emotional, something that roots itself in his daily experience. Because in a world that constantly demands more of him, a woman who becomes his calm in the storm is a rare and sacred gift, and he feels it even if he doesn't have the words to explain it. You see, most men live in a quiet battlefield. There are expectations to meet. There's competition, survival, unspoken emotional wounds. There's pressure to perform, to win, to keep it together, even when everything inside is unraveling. And often the world doesn't give them space to feel. They aren't always heard. They aren't always understood. But when he meets a woman whose energy feels like rest, like safety, like stillness, that's when emotional addiction begins. Not about perfection. It's not how about her always saying the right thing. It's about how her presence affects his nervous system. A woman who is grounded, centered, not reactive, constantly demanding or proving, she becomes a sanctuary. When she speaks, there's no hidden motive. When she listens to understand, not to respond. She holds eye contact like she sees through his fear and doesn't flinch. She gives him space without making him feel abandoned, and he starts to associate her with emotional ease. That ease becomes his craving. She doesn't try to fix him. She doesn't shame his silence. She doesn't demand an emotional performance. Instead, she offers presence. And presence is rare. Most people are half in and half out. But when she's there, she's fully there. And when she's gone, he feels it. Because her energy isn't noisy, her energy is healing. And let me tell you this, men don't always chase what excites them, but they stay close to what calms them. The world already excites them. The world already pressures them. What they long for is the softness that doesn't come with manipulation, the warmth that doesn't come with control. They long for the woman who reminds them of who they are without demanding they be more than they are in that moment. A man becomes emotionally addicted to a woman who brings him home to himself. She doesn't pull him away from his masculinity. She calls him deeper into it. She reminds him that strength and softness are not enemies, that vulnerability is not weakness. And the moment he realizes he can be both powerful and gentle in her presence, he begins to return to her, not out of obligation, but out of emotional need. He may not say it. He may not even understand it at first, but he knows how he feels around her. He knows he breathes easier. He knows the conversations linger. He knows the silence between them isn't awkward. It's safe. And that kind of peace, that kind of feminine presence, it doesn't just touch his heart. It wraps itself around his soul. Because the truth is this, the man along with a woman's body first, that's what keeps me the same. That's what makes her impressible. That's what makes her look better than other people. That's why it's for everybody. Because there's never been anything. Really. That's what makes her impressive when she's silent. That's what keeps her sane. That's what makes her impressible. That's what makes her attractive when you're not crazy and beautiful and stupid. Ready? That's the truth. No matter what, man, it doesn't matter our weather. If he even looks at the picture, and when a woman chooses to be peace in a world full of pressure, she doesn't have to chase any man. He will find his way back, not to impress her, but to feel her. Because peace is not loud, but it echoes longer than noise ever could. That's the kind of connection that never fades. When a man finds a woman who understands him on a deeper level, a unique emotional connection starts to develop. It's the kind of understanding that goes beyond simple words or gestures. It's a connection rooted in intuition. The key here is that she doesn't try to change him or fix him. Instead, she simply sees him for who he is, acknowledges his flaws, and accepts him anyway. This acceptance becomes a form of emotional nourishment for him. You see, most men grow up in environments where they're expected to be strong, self-sufficient, and unemotional. They're taught to suppress their vulnerability and hide their weaknesses. This can lead to a sense of isolation. They often feel like they have to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. And because of this, they sometimes fail to express their true feelings or desires. They may have deep fears and insecurities, but the world often tells them that showing any form of weakness is unacceptable. But when a man meets a woman who accepts him without judgment, who looks at him and doesn't try to fix him, but simply holds space for his emotions, something shifts inside him. He begins to let his guard down, even if just a little. She doesn't force him to talk about his problems, but through her patience and understanding, he finds himself opening up more than he ever thought possible. In those moments, he feels like he can truly be himself. And this is a rarity in a world that constantly tells him to conform and hide his vulnerabilities. The emotional addiction starts to take root when she allows him to experience true freedom in her presence. He begins to trust her with parts of himself he may have buried for years. He starts to believe that it's okay to be weak sometimes, that it's okay to not have all the answers. And this emotional safety becomes something he deeply craves. It's not about being told what to do, it's about being seen for who he really is, beyond the surface. And when that happens, he feels valued in a way that goes beyond physical attraction or superficial praise. This emotional bond grows stronger because she offers him the emotional space to grow, evolve, and be imperfect without feeling judged. She doesn't try to put him into a box, nor does she rush him into being something he's not ready to be. Instead, she respects his pace, his emotional rhythm, and his boundaries. This creates an environment where he feels emotionally safe. And the beauty of this type of emotional connection is that it doesn't demand anything. It's a natural pull. It's magnetic. The more she creates this space for him to be himself, the more he feels attached to her. He doesn't feel smothered, he feels liberated. He feels like he can finally exhale. This is why, despite the chaos of the world, a man can feel deeply attached to a woman who simply understands him. It's not about grand gestures or trying to fix everything in his life. It's about providing him with the peace and safety to simply exist without pressure. What makes this emotional connection so strong is that it's built on trust. Trust doesn't come easily to men, especially in a world that has taught them to keep their emotions hidden. But when a woman consistently shows that she understands him without demanding more than he's ready to give, she becomes someone he feels he can rely on. This trust deepens over time, and he starts to feel like he has found a rare gem in her, a woman who is not trying to change him, but is simply there, accepting him for all that he is. Over time, this emotional safety becomes addictive. He doesn't want to lose the feeling of being understood and accepted. He may not even realize how deep this addiction goes, but he will find himself thinking about her when she's not around, missing her presence, missing the way she makes him feel grounded, valued, and accepted. Be true, he psychologically can't avoid the truth of life. Life is all about connection, emotions, crime, and concern. It's a base label story like many instead of propaganda or emotions. Life is about connection or neediness. It's a genuine emotional exchange, not out of obligation, but because he values the peace she brings into his life. And in this deep emotional connection, both partners have the potential to grow stronger together. It's not about him leaning on her to fix his problems. It's about him finding the strength to be vulnerable with her, knowing she will accept him, flaws and all. That kind of emotional safety isn't easy to come by. And once a man experiences it, he will never take it for granted. Because when a man experiences a woman's deep emotional understanding, he doesn't just remember it, he craves it. When a man starts to feel emotionally understood and valued, something shifts in him. The realization that he's truly seen for who he is beyond his accomplishments or how the world perceives him creates a powerful sense of attachment. It's an attachment rooted in emotional security. He knows that with her, he doesn't have to be anyone other than himself. There's no need to play a role, no need to wear a mask, because she doesn't expect him to be perfect. And this, my friends, is a rare gift. In most relationships, we tend to put on a facade, hiding our true selves because we fear rejection or judgment. But when a man finds a woman who offers him nothing but acceptance and emotional safety, the layers of pretense begin to peel away. He's no longer held captive by the pressure to perform or to meet unrealistic standards. Instead, he's free to experience life and love in a more genuine way. This freedom is addicting. The deeper he falls into the comfort of this unspoken understanding, the harder it becomes for him to turn away. He craves the emotional authenticity she provides. It's not about grand gestures. It's the small, everyday moments where he feels her support, her care, and her unwavering belief in him. A man who's emotionally connected to a woman like this starts to open up in ways he may have never done with anyone before. He shares thoughts, fears, and dreams that he's held on to for years simply because he knows she won't judge him. She listens, she respects, and she acknowledges his vulnerability. This safe space she creates is the key to unlocking his true emotions, and it becomes something he cherishes deeply. It's not just about the emotional release, though that is important, but it's also about the comfort of knowing that someone genuinely cares and understands him without any strings attached. As this connection grows, his need for validation from others decreases. He no longer feels the need to seek approval from the outside world. The constant struggle to prove himself fades because he finds validation within the relationship. Her acceptance becomes more than just a gesture. It becomes the foundation of his emotional strength. And as he becomes more emotionally attached to her, the idea of losing that connection becomes more unbearable. The emotional bond grows tighter, and every moment spent with her becomes a source of comfort and joy. This is the point where he begins to realize that his feelings for her have transcended mere attraction. It's no longer just about love. It's about emotional dependence. His attachment to her goes beyond what he might have ever expected, and now he finds himself drawn to her in ways he cannot fully explain. The emotional addiction takes hold because, with her, he feels like he's found a place where he can truly belong. Her presence in his life becomes a stabilizing force. This is why, even if his ego gets in the way, he can't shake the desire to hold on. He may not openly admit it, but deep down, he knows that she's the one who gives him the emotional peace he's always craved. When a man starts to experience emotional dependence, it often comes from the deep desire to protect something he believes is irreplaceable. It's not just about the attachment to her, it's about the fear of losing the comfort and the emotional safety she has provided. This feeling of protection is instinctual. It's the part of him that wants to keep what feels good, what makes him feel whole. Over time, this feeling grows stronger. The moments of shared vulnerability, the way she listens without judgment, the way she supports him unconditionally, it becomes a lifeline. He begins to rely on her in ways that might even surprise him. His thoughts often drift back to her when he's stressed or faced with challenges, because the emotional connection she offers is something that no one else has ever been able to replicate. And because of that, the idea of losing her doesn't just trigger sadness, it triggers a deep fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of rejection, fear of having to face the world without the one person who truly sees him. This fear doesn't come from weakness, it comes from love. The more he becomes emotionally dependent, the more protective he feels of this bond. It's an internal struggle. Part of him knows that he must maintain his own sense of self and independence, but the other part of him fears that without her, he will lose everything that has given his life emotional depth. This is why the attachment becomes so deep. It's not just about love. It's about the fear of losing something irreplaceable. It's about needing her in ways that go beyond attraction or infatuation. It's about the way she makes him feel grounded and how that grounding creates an addiction he's not always aware of. In these moments, when a man is deeply emotionally connected, he may not always know how to articulate it, but he knows that without her, the emotional stability he's come to rely on would shatter. When a man becomes emotionally addicted to a woman, it's often because of the way she makes him feel seen and understood. In the chaos of life, when the world might be harsh or indifferent, she becomes a source of validation. It's not just about affection or admiration. It's about how she mirrors back to him the parts of himself he struggles to accept. She becomes a reflection that validates his worth, and in doing so, he begins to emotionally rely on her presence. It's not a conscious decision, but rather something that happens naturally over time. She supports him in ways no one else does, and that support creates a bond that's difficult to break. Her words, her actions, they remind him of his value, and that constant reinforcement fosters dependency. He starts to associate his happiness with her, not because he can't find joy on his own, but because her presence makes that joy more accessible, more genuine. This kind of emotional addiction also stems from the fear of losing the validation she provides. It's not always about the individual traits she possesses, but about how she affirms his identity, his emotional needs. When this validation is consistent, it becomes a crutch. He grows more comfortable leaning on her to fulfill those deep emotional needs that might otherwise go unmet. In this process, the emotional attachment deepens. It's not that he can't live without her, but the fear of not receiving that same support elsewhere becomes overwhelming. This connection doesn't have to be unhealthy, but if left unchecked, it can evolve into an unhealthy dependency. He becomes afraid of letting go, not because he doesn't have the strength to stand alone, but because standing alone would mean confronting the emotional void she filled. Ultimately, he has to learn to find that validation within himself, or else he risks becoming emotionally dependent in a way that stifles his own growth and independence. It's a delicate balance that must be navigated carefully for both individuals to thrive. When a man becomes emotionally addicted to a woman, he often begins to crave the emotional stability she provides. She becomes his anchor, the one constant in a world that might otherwise feel chaotic or uncertain. Her presence can make him feel secure in ways he might not have experienced before. It's as if, when she's around, the noise of the world fades and he can finally breathe. He starts to feel more grounded, more at peace with himself and his life when she's by his side. This emotional attachment can develop through simple acts: the way she listens when he talks, how she understands his unspoken words, or even the way she supports his dreams. These things provide him with a sense of comfort and reassurance, and over time, this sense of peace becomes addictive. It's not about needing her, but rather relying on the feeling she gives him. That feeling of being understood, supported, and loved can create a bond that becomes harder to break. He may not even realize it's happening, but every time he pulls away or faces a challenge, he turns to her for that emotional support, as if she holds the answers to his peace of mind. This dynamic can create a cycle where he feels incomplete without her emotional presence. However, true emotional growth comes from learning to be whole and at peace within himself, without needing someone else to provide that stability. This doesn't mean the relationship is doomed. It simply means that for him to remain balanced, he must learn to nurture his emotional independence while still cherishing the bond they share. Emotional addiction in a relationship often leads to a situation where a man starts to rely too much on the validation he receives from a woman. He begins to find his worth in how she perceives him, how much she appreciates him, and how she supports him. This validation feels like a fuel that drives him, but it also creates an unhealthy dependence. His self-esteem, his sense of purpose, and even his confidence can become tethered to her approval. Over time, he starts to measure his success by her reactions. If she's happy with him, he feels successful. If she's upset or distant, he feels inadequate. His emotional highs and lows are no longer determined by his own growth, but by the relationship's status. This can lead to him becoming emotionally reactive, trying to do whatever it takes to keep her happy or to fix things when they go wrong. But here's the danger. This validation becomes a vicious cycle. The more he seeks approval, the more he loses touch with his true self, and the less he feels whole without her validation. He becomes emotionally addicted to her, not because of the love they share, but because of the self-worth he derives from her acknowledgement. It's important for him to realize that true emotional fulfillment comes from within, not from relying on another person's approval. A balanced relationship thrives when both partners feel secure in themselves, not when one becomes emotionally dependent on the other for their sense of self-worth. This shift in mindset is key to breaking free from emotional dependency and creating a healthy flourish. When a man becomes emotionally addicted to a woman, it's often because he has developed a deep emotional attachment that goes beyond mutual affection. It becomes a need. This need isn't just for companionship. It grows into an emotional reliance. He starts to believe that he can't be whole or truly happy without her presence in his life. Her approval, her attention, her love, these things become the barometer for his emotional well-being. This dependency isn't just about feeling love, it's about feeling validated, feeling that he's worthy, that he matters. And often this kind of emotional addiction begins early in the relationship. There may be a time when he experiences deep emotional highs whenever she shows him affection or care, and it can feel like a drug, something he craves continuously. Over time, the excitement fades, but the emotional need continues to grow. He no longer just wants her love. He needs it to feel complete. One of the core things that triggers this addiction is the sense of insecurity. Perhaps he's always had an underlying fear of abandonment or rejection, and when he's with her, he feels safe. But when things are off between them, or when there's distance, that insecurity flares up, causing anxiety. In these moments, his need for her becomes more about filling that void of fear and uncertainty rather than simply loving her for who she is. The relationship dynamics begin to shift, where he might start losing touch with his own needs, his own desires, and his own sense of self. He sacrifices parts of himself in the hope that it will bring her closer, that it will keep her happy, and most importantly, keep her around. This leads to an unhealthy imbalance, where his actions are driven by his fear of losing her rather than by genuine, balanced love. The real challenge here is recognizing that emotional addiction, as painful as it may be, can be broken. It requires both partners to have emotional independence, to be secure within themselves, to stand firm in who they are without needing the other to validate them. It takes time to unlearn the patterns of dependency and to rebuild one's own emotional foundation. It requires deep self-awareness and a commitment to personal growth. This doesn't mean that love and emotional connection are bad. In fact, a healthy relationship thrives when both people can be emotionally independent, but choose to be with each other out of love, not necessity. Ultimately, when a man understands that he can be happy, fulfilled, and emotionally stable without his partner's validation, he breaks free from the addiction and opens the door to a healthier, more balanced relationship. The love that follows isn't built on need, but on choice and mutual respect. It's a love that empowers both people to grow, both individually and together, without relying on each other to fill voids that should be filled within. This transformation is key to maintaining long-term happiness and emotional fulfillment in any relationship. When a man is emotionally addicted to a woman, it's often because he has built a pattern where he has come to rely on her presence for his emotional stability. This relationship is no longer just about mutual affection or companionship. It becomes about needing her. It's about him feeling incomplete without her. This emotional reliance can make it hard for him to break away, even when he realizes deep down that this dependency is unhealthy. So the emotional addiction begins to take on the shape of an unhealthy attachment, one that isn't grounded in love, but in neediness and fear. When a man's sense of self-worth is tied to his partner, he becomes increasingly vulnerable to emotional turmoil. The smallest sign of distance or conflict can send him spiraling because his emotional equilibrium is so tied to her approval, her attention, and her love. His self-esteem becomes fragile because it's based on how he perceives she feels about him. If things go wrong, it feels like everything is wrong. His world, emotionally speaking, falls apart. This is why the addiction to her becomes so intense and difficult to break. At the root of this addiction is often insecurity. It's the fear of abandonment, the fear of not being good enough, or the fear of being alone. A man who feels this way may rely on the woman for validation because it temporarily alleviates the fear. When he's with her, it feels like he's not alone in the world. But when things start to fall apart, that fear rushes in like a tidal wave. He may feel like he can't survive without her, which fuels the addiction even further. He's not just afraid of losing her, he's afraid of losing himself, his sense of identity, and the stability she brings to his emotional life. What happens next is that this emotional neediness begins to dictate the dynamics of the relationship. The more a man clings to a woman, the more he may start losing himself in the process. His happiness, his peace, his emotional state all become heavily dependent on the actions of the woman. In doing so, he might compromise his own needs, desires, and boundaries just to maintain the connection. This is when things become toxic, not because love doesn't exist, but because the love is built on an emotional imbalance. What's truly needed here is growth, personal growth. A man who is emotionally addicted to a woman must first begin to separate his identity from his dependence on her. He needs to develop emotional resilience and self-worth independent of the relationship. It's not about stopping loving her. It's about learning to love and be fulfilled within himself. Once he can stand firm on his own, the need for her approval and presence becomes less about survival and more about mutual support. This is what makes love mature, healthy, and sustainable. In order to break free from emotional addiction, a man needs to become aware of his emotional patterns. It takes time, self-reflection, and courage to start facing the underlying fears that fuel this dependence. The moment he recognizes that his sense of self-worth does not lie in the hands of someone else, that's the moment he starts reclaiming his emotional freedom. Only then can he move forward into a relationship that is truly based on equality, respect, and the freedom to love without fear. The key to breaking this emotional addiction is realizing that love shouldn't be about filling a void. It should be about sharing a life with someone who complements you, not completes you. Once this understanding sinks in, the cycle of dependency can be broken. Both partners can thrive, both individually and together. The emotional freedom that follows this realization is what leads to a more fulfilling and lasting relationship. When we talk about what makes a man emotionally addicted to a woman, it's important to realize that emotional addiction isn't just about attachment. It's about a deeply ingrained psychological pattern. One of the factors that contribute to this addiction is how much emotional energy and validation he derives from the relationship. Over time, if this need isn't met, a man may become more desperate, clinging to the woman because he believes that without her, he has no sense of self. This emotional neediness becomes a cycle where his happiness becomes increasingly dependent on her actions, her attention, and her approval. The emotional addiction often becomes so strong that a man may begin to lose touch with his own identity. He might start compromising his own desires and interests just to ensure the woman remains in his life. When he's emotionally dependent, he believes that any distance or conflict could cause the relationship to fall apart. The weight of this belief is heavy, and it leads to the need to please her at all costs. What starts as an innocent desire to be loved and accepted can spiral into a pattern of unhealthy attachment where he sacrifices his own well-being to maintain the connection. But this emotional dependence doesn't only manifest in desperate actions. It's a mental pattern too. Over time, he starts to attach his sense of worth to how the woman feels about him. If she's upset with him, he feels worthless. If she pulls away, it feels like the world is crumbling. This leads to anxiety, stress, and the constant need for reassurance. These emotional highs and lows become the very foundation of his emotional existence. Rather than experiencing a healthy, balanced connection, he becomes trapped in a cycle where his emotional state is in constant flux, depending on the state. In these moments, it's crucial to recognize that this isn't love. Love shouldn't be a crutch or a lifeline. It shouldn't be the thing that determines whether or not he feels good about himself. In fact, love should be something that helps two individuals become stronger in their own identities, not weaker. For a man who's emotionally addicted to a woman, the first step in breaking the cycle is learning how to reclaim his own emotional power. This means finding self-worth outside of the relationship, developing interests and passions that are independent of the woman. It's not about pulling away or rejecting her. It's about finding balance. The next key part of healing this addiction is confronting the fears that drive it. Fear is a powerful emotion, and it can often dictate our decisions. For a man who is emotionally addicted, his fear might be the fear of being alone, the fear of not being enough, or the fear of abandonment. These fears are often rooted in past experiences, insecurities, or past relationships that haven't healed. Overcoming these fears requires courage and self-reflection. He must face them head-on and acknowledge that they do not define him. Only then can he start to detach his self-worth from his partner's approval. This emotional addiction, though challenging, can be overcome. It requires a conscious effort to redefine what a healthy relationship looks like. In a balanced, mature relationship, both partners rely on each other for love and support, but they also stand as whole, independent individuals. Emotional addiction can only be healed when each person finds emotional freedom within themselves so that they can contribute to the relationship as a complete individual rather than as someone desperately clinging to the other. When a man begins to heal, he starts to shift the energy in the relationship. Instead of clinging, he learns to give space, allowing both individuals to grow independently while still fostering love and connection. He finds fulfillment in other aspects of his life, his work, his friendships, his hobbies, and no longer depends solely on the woman for his emotional stability. This shift is what leads to a more balanced, healthy, and fulfilling relationship where both partners can thrive as individuals and together as a couple. The journey from emotional addiction to emotional freedom is not easy, and it takes time, patience, and self-love, but it is possible. When a man is able to break free from this dependency, he will find that his love for the woman can be much deeper and more fulfilling because it is no longer tainted by fear, insecurity, and neediness. Instead, it becomes a partnership between two people who are whole and confident in their own lives and who choose to be together, not because they need each other, but because they want to share life together.